Michael Ernest Kitces, how are you?
David Carl Richards the third.
Third,
The
that's
third.
right. That's
DCFD
DCR.
or DCI. See, I want to say DCF every time. I want to do
Yeah.
discounted cash flow every time.
Yeah.
My brain cannot let this go. It is so
Yeah.
hard for me to say
Yeah.
DCR and not DCF. But DCF
Yeah.
number three, we're still on the first version. It works well.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So
So
how
I,
is
I
DCR
yeah,
three these days?
I'm doing great. Yeah, things are really, really great. 2025 feels like a fantastic year. So, and speaking of that,
So what's on your
I I ran across this idea from a guy named Jonathan Pope. So Jonathan Pope wrote a book
okay,
called Building the Elite. He's a trainer for special
okay.
forces guys, and his book is like 500-page book. It's really a systems thinking book. I would recommend anybody read it. Like it's really really good. It's really a systems thinking book, pretending to be a strength training book. So it's really great. But one of the things Jonathan introduced me to, the concepts, I was actually having a conversation with him, and
Okay.
he talked about this idea that really resonated with me. He talked about this idea of, well, actually, let me tell you first. I'm not going to tell you the idea yet. So he talked about this idea that really resonated with me. And I, of course, because I also almost don't let anything out in the world anymore unless I've taken it through my editor in chief,
Which is,
my brainstorming friend and editor in chief, which is
oh,
an AI tool.
of course it is.
It's been incredible. I continue to be like just blown away by how much better, how much more thoughtful my work is by just running it through. So I introduced this idea. 7 minutes later, I had sort of fleshed it out a bit, cleaned it up. I sent it to you in the form of an email. And here's the idea. Jonathan talked about the importance of reducing fear for clients who feel intimidated when they first come into a new environment like a gym. He was talking about gyms. And that idea was really interesting to me. Like, think of the intimidation factor of coming in to see a financial advisor for the first time. And I remember Amy Mullen, I believe it was Amy Mullen, saying that our very presence in the conversation, right, changes the nature of the
Yep.
conversation, right? Like, oh no, now I got to talk like a financial planner would expect
Yep.
me to talk, right? So what Jonathan was saying was, what are the things, like he was thinking through, what are the things he could do to lower that fear, right? Like giving them a description, clear outline of what to expect before those sessions. And he noticed that
Before the like
preparation,
gym sessions, because this
yeah,
is
like you're going to show up here. And so I wanted to sort of talk with you about like, I came up with a bunch of ideas of things, but it would be fun to talk through them. But
I'm just
the,
trying to vision it in the gym context first, just like where
yeah,
this is going. It's like so what
well,
like what are
yeah,
his D fear, reduce fear,
yeah,
the gym things.
de-fearing. Yeah, I think this like it. First of all, where does the fear come from is interesting to me. Like
Well, that's
lack lack of
yeah.
predictability, lack of control, right? New environment. I don't know what's going to happen there, and I am not the one in control. So some of the simple examples he came up to was like as simple as where to park. And the gym I go to, it's this, you know, it's a private gym that you can buy kind of a membership to and have a scan. It just recently moved. And sometimes I'm on the third floor looking out, watching people pull up. And even that idea of like where to park is interesting. How the session will flow, right? Like here's what we're going to do when you first show up. We're going to meet here, we're going to talk a little bit. And even he said even down to what the gym atmosphere is like, right? Like you can expect that it will be quiet there, or you can expect that it will be loud music. There will be other people there. We won't be alone. Or, this is my own private gym, so we will be alone. Like even any of those sorts of things he noticed can make the difference between somebody showing up sort of confidently and ready to get to work or somebody feeling too overwhelmed and like the first 15 minutes of it are just like settling them down.
I I think that's part of what I was trying to visualize, and maybe that helps. Like, am I trying to reduce the fear because I'm afraid you're not gonna come? Like I'm I'm reducing
Mm.
your like blocking point excuses about why you're not going to come? Or is the idea like you're coming, but new environments are flustering because human beings don't like change. So like I can cut down how long it is. Yeah, like I can make you more confident when you show up and more ready to engage more quickly because you're not just as like flustered in getting into your new environment and surroundings and trying to figure out how all this stuff works because I demystified it for you in advance. So
Yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to like is this about making you show up better when you're here, or am I just trying to make sure you show up at all?
I don't know how to separate those two out necessarily. I think what it's
Okay.
about for me is being really thoughtful about the human being and their experience, right? I'm surprised the level to which. Let me give you another example, which is really interesting. So here in Park City, Utah, at the ski resort in the morning before they open, you can climb up to the top of the mountain and then ski down, and you do it with this special thing on your skis called skins, and it like people are really into it. Like people do it a lot, and there's a really I've started taking people to do this, and there's a really prominent, incredibly well written, really well known venture capitalist who somebody's like, hey, you should go ski with Carl. I was like, great. And so I sent him an email and he's backcountry skied before back east. Like he knows how to go into like avalanche terrain. But I asked him, I said, hey, I never want to make any assumptions. Would it be helpful just to know what to expect when you show up Saturday morning? And he was like, yeah. So I wrote him like what to wear, where to park, you know what? And I was like, this is really silly. I hope he's not offended. But he replied and was like, I can't tell you how much this how helpful this is. Right? This is really like intelligent person who's done lots of
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
It's been in lots of scary environments. So I don't think we can overstate how helpful it could be to somebody to help them understand. And I think particularly with financial planners, like you've been told your whole life, you didn't talk to anybody about money. And you certainly don't talk to those crooks and criminals that we read about in the newspaper,
Right, right, right.
you know?
I I'm intrigued. Like I'm just kind of processing this. Uh like there are pieces of this that start to click to me as I think about it. It's even down like where to park. Okay, I guess this varies a little bit about where you are, what part of the country you are. Our DC area, we have a wide range of parking possibilities, right? Just I mean, you don't know if you're. I mean, if you've never been to the place, I don't know if I'm in like a office buildings uh 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 like complex out in the suburbs where there's just going to be lots of parking because they take down giant lots of land. I don't know if there's going to be a parking garage. I don't know if you're actually closer in one of the like little downtown areas that they love building around here these days, which means there's no parking garage nearby and the street parking isn't viable. So, right, so I'm like, okay, well, if I'm not really sure, then probably got to go like plan to be there 10 minutes early just in case I don't know where to park. And then it turns out that it was a straightforward office building to park in, and now I'm just 10 minutes early. And now I'm sitting around in the waiting room
Yeah.
going like, why did I drive here 10 minutes early? Like I could have gotten something else done before I left, right? So, or
Yeah.
worse, I don't plan for the extra time and it turns out that your parking's a garage around the corner and now I'm like 3 minutes late coming in. And if I'm one of those people that really likes being on time, now I'm really stressed. So yeah, just like
Totally.
I can immediately start playing out these scenarios in my head. Like, sure, there's a whole bunch of clients who by their prospects, who by the time they show up in the office, they're already a little bit flustered because they did or did not sufficiently prepare for the nuances around how to park for our office. And they could be annoyed either because they underprepared and got it wrong or they overprepared and got it
Right.
wrong.
Right. Right.
Either of which might throw them off a little bit. Oh, and then I don't even know what's going to happen in this meeting. Like, I'm coming in with one set of expectations about what I think a financial planner is going to ask me, even though I've never seen a financial planner and I really have no idea. So I come in with one expectation, and then you start asking me different things than what I expected, and now I'm flustered again. Like I just
Totally.
the more I
I,
start processing through that, like I don't know that I was going to lose a prospect because they were anxious about how to park in my office,
sure.
but
Sure.
I can see just people in a better mental state when we just start reducing just all these like little bits. of uncertainty that otherwise is just like a cognitive load. Like I'm not just going to their office. I'm going to their office. I gotta make sure I get there far enough in advance. I gotta make sure I can figure out how to park. Did I bring the right information? Am I dressed appropriately? Like I was coming from work. I'm overdressed. I was coming from the gym. Do I need to bring a set of clothes with me to change at the gym? Because I don't want to show up my financial advisor's office wearing gym clothes because that seems like inappropriate because they're money people. I think I'm supposed to be more formal, right?
Yeah.
I'm not like riffing of all the different things that I can pretty easily envision, or just, the wide range of clients who showed at the office over the years,
Yeah.
that there's just this cognitive load, particularly when you're going into an environment for the first time. And it's just easier when you get rid of all that load. Here's where to park. Here's
Yeah,
what
I
to
don't
expect. Here's what we're going to cover. Here's the appropriate dress code or not.
totally. I honestly believe, like, look, you don't like you don't need to make this into a really big deal, but the amount of effort it would take to prepare a small paragraph or two that outlined this that got sent pre-meeting, because anything you can do to lower the temperature, right? The fight or flight feeling of like, I'm going to talk about money. This is already stressful. Anything you can do. And
Yeah,
the second thing I think it does is it immediately paints you as different, right? And I think a lot of the K-State work around what your office should look like was kind of pointing
yep,
almost at the same thing, right? Like,
yep.
we want this to feel like a place where you can relax, where we can have a conversation about things that matter. We don't want you to feel tense and worried. And so I think that
Right.
just how you arrive, let's go through a couple more. Let me just give you a list and then we can decide which
Yeah, I
ones to
would say
talk
so.
about.
Like, what else? Because someone I hope is listening to this and actually visioning or starting to craft their literal uh expectations document. I don't know, you can tell me at the end what you would call it. But so what else? So
Yeah.
where to park? Okay,
How the
even if you
meeting,
think it's simple, they don't know it's
y-
simple. You know it's simple because you
totally.
park there every day. They have no idea what it's like at your office.
Some basic, like I have seen some people who have done this, which I'm always just like, wow, that was such a smart touch. Literally just directions. Like if you're coming from here, turn here, turn here. How the meeting will begin and flow. So like the structure of the meeting. Like it could be as simple as the goal of this first meeting is just for me to ask a lot of questions so I can clearly understand where you are today and where you want to go.
I was going
I'll
to
be
say, how,
asking.
how how deep are you going? How deep do you feel like you need to go in this, like how the meeting will begin and flow? So just at that level, like the purpose of this meeting is just for me to ask a lot of questions and better understand you and your spouse and what's going on in your financial lives.
Yeah, and get really clear about the questions that brought you in today using some of your language. Like it could be that simple. The goal of this first meeting is just for me to understand what brought you in today, and if what we do is a good fit, right? It could be that simple. Now, one of the things I want to get to in a minute is clear expectations of any commitments that will be asked for, right?
Okay.
And let's talk about that in a minute. But the meeting begin and flow, what kind of questions they'll be asked or not asked. And one thing I used to say, and this goes along with the next one, what they need to bring or what not to worry about. So I remember like this whole phase of like, bring everything, bring your statements, your tax returns. You have to come. It's a requirement.
Yes, I need my data, Carl.
Yeah, I know. And I remember people would bring it, right? Like you would always be like, wow, I can't believe that
In
worked.
a
But
box, in a
they always
disorganized
look,
box. Yep.
yeah, or they always look like they were like they had their hands on their wallets, right? Like it was in a briefcase down here, and you are not going to get this from me. Like there was always sort of this like,
Yeah.
oh,
If I decide at the end of this meeting that you're credible, I will lift the box on the table and slide it
exactly right.
across to you. But if not, we're just going to keep the box on my side of the table with all the
That's exactly right.
documents until
That's
you've
exactly.
proven yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad you've had that same experience. So what I finally decided was to switch that and just say, and always in the service of the client, not in the service of me, always in the service of the client. All right. So it just say, I know how busy you are, or I know how important your time is. So to make the most of our meeting, you may want to review these documents before you come in case it comes up, right? And then just give them a list, like review your last brokerage account, review your mortgage, just give them a list. Don't ask them to bring it. Just like, so if you ask them, what's your interest rate? Oh, 6%. And then I would always use the phrase in case it comes up, right? To make the best use of our time, it would be helpful if you reviewed these things in case it comes up, right? So
Okay.
that's under the what to bring and what not to worry about. How long the meeting will last,
Okay.
how the meeting will end, including a very clear expectation of any commitments, right? So, kind of for example, letting clients know that the goal of the meeting is simply to explore whether it's a good fit, and no decisions will be need to be made on the spot. Like that's an example. Or, hey, by the end of this first meeting, I expect you to know whether you want to work with me. I'm going to ask you to sign a document that you're ready to move on. Like whatever your meeting looks like, I would suggest the former, right? But those are some ideas of what could be in this document. What
And
sticks out to you?
and this is what sticks out to me. Like I'm overthinking my answers to all these questions, and it's going to be a 4-page
Shocker.
document
This is
no
shocker.
one wants to read. Right? I
It
mean, I'll
can't.
admit, like I'm. You put a lot of things in those, all sound awesome, and I could write a paragraph or two about each. And now this is like a 2 or 3 page document. Is
Then
is
then
that
what you do, write
is that
that.
too
That'd be great.
long?
No, that's way too long. Write that, give that to ChatGPT and say, turn this into a
There you
sentence,
go.
a half a sentence a piece, right? Like this document needs to be 100 words, 250 words or less. Like you could do this and get really clean and tight.
I really
And
like the suggestion, like, and then give it to ChatGPT and tell it to make this shorter.
yeah, and you tell it the reason, like, hey, you're our head of
Yep.
hospitality. Your goal is to make sure everybody feels comfortable coming in. We honestly want this in service of the clients. We just want them to feel good. People come here a little stressed. We want to alleviate that stress. Here's 7 areas that we think need to be addressed. Here's what I wrote. There's a paragraph. It's way too long. I need this to be literally like a third of a page that we can send out in an email. Please make it that.
So, just process about through. So, like directions and where to park, how the meeting will begin and flow. And I thought you framed it well, just down to like, okay, we can make this because I can again, like I can write paragraphs about all of this. So, how the meeting will begin and flow. The goal of this first meeting is just to understand what brought you into the meeting today and whether what we do might be a good fit for you.
Yeah, let me
Cool.
introduce one more thing there. Like I also think your meeting process is helpful. Sorry, this would probably be something you'd show them in the meeting, right? So I think them showing up, like you sent them that, what you just said,
Okay.
but in the meeting, we always had a little road map, and it was almost the first thing we showed people. We're like, hey, before we get
Like this
started, let
is
me just
our
show you,
3 meeting process, our six
and
six
and
step
we're
financial
here.
planning process. Okay.
Yeah, and we're here. And this is, I've already told you about the purpose of today's meeting, but to reinforce it, I just want to clearly understand what brought you in today and see if what we do would be valuable to you. But if we decide at the end of this meeting, as I mentioned in that letter I sent you, there will be no commitment asked for and no commitment accepted except to go home and think about it. We'll both go and think about it. If we decide to meet again, that's this meeting here, and then it would be this meeting here. That's what it looks like. And it was just a simple diagram of like literally like 4 boxes built
Okay.
in Keynote or PowerPoint.
And you said what kinds of questions will be asked or not asked? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like I think you could say, um, the goal of this first meeting, what I always said was the goal of this first meeting was to understand real clearly where you are and where you want to go, right?
Okay.
So that if we decide to work together, we could put together a plan to get you there, right? At the end of this meeting, we'll know whether it's a good fit and whether we should move on or not, but we can reserve judgment. So, but I love the idea of just being like, the goal of this first meeting is simply to understand real clearly what brought you in, right? What precipitated the call, your inquiry, and whether what we do would be a good fit. So I'll be asking questions to get clarity around that,
Okay.
right? Like simple.
Okay.
Oh, and that could
That's
lead to the what to.
definitely short. So I'll be asking questions to get clarity around that is definitely shorter than what I had in
Yeah,
mind as you framed this
that's
up. So
you haven't even
that was
caught your breath by that
very
point.
helpful. That's
So,
like
but
8 words. I can't even tee up the question in less
I've
than eight
heard
words.
that's what I've heard. Like I heard David White once say, the poet David White said, like I want to have a 5 minute conversation with you. I said I want to, and he said, Carl, for a 5 minute conversation isn't even time for an Irishman to catch his breath. Like that was great, but that could lead into the next one, right? Like so we can make that conversation the most effective use of your time. You may want to review these documents before you come in case it comes up. So you've already hinted at like we'll go as deep or as not deep as we feel comfortable together. But if you're prepared, that would be great.
And then just mechanics, how long will this meeting last?
Yeah, I think
How,
to me,
yeah,
90
I
minutes has
get
got
it.
to be the outside edge. But I know I've been in financial planning meetings a lot longer than that. But I think, plan on 60 minutes, plan on 90 minutes, like
Yeah.
whatever that is.
I think just how the meeting will end, expectations, right? Yeah. At the end of this meeting, I'm just going to give you some information and ask you to go home and think about it. Or the end of this meeting, I'm hoping that you'll have a clear decision about whether you'd like to move forward or not. And if you wish to, we'll be ready to begin the paperwork, right? Like whatever it is,
Whatever it is, yeah.
at least we're all clear about what's
Yeah.
supposed to happen here.
I'll
If they're
just
spooked
for
by that,
the
they weren't ready to sign, so you saved yourself a meeting.
yeah, and for the sake of just being helpful, like the way I wrote that was at the end of this meeting, there will be no commitments asked for or accepted.
Oh,
Right. Like, and I just want you to go home. My hope is at the end of this meeting, we'll both have enough information to mutually decide whether it's a good fit. And you'll go home and think about it. That's what I said in the first 5 minutes of the first meeting. I would say, look, at the end of this meeting, I want you to go home and think about it. Show your mother-in-law, show your father-in-law. If you have other financial advisors you want to see, go see them. Like, like, go do all that, and then we'll check in with you. And if we feel like it's a good fit, we'll schedule the next meeting. But you can put whatever you think.
yeah.
Just be clear about the expectations at how will the meeting end because they're waiting, right? They're like, this is used car sales.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like that's the experience they're expecting
Yep.
is like, okay, when's the manager going to get pulled in? And then I'm going to have to do the thing. And they're waiting. So just clarify right up front that this is a different experience than what they're
Give me
expecting.
$1 to seal your commitment while I bring this back to my manager to
I
get it
don't know. I mean,
approved.
what would it take for you to commit today?
Oh, you're like just giving me painful flashbacks of my
Yeah,
first
for
first car
sure.
buying experience.
For
Uh,
sure.
and you said what to bring and what not to worry about. So I get what to bring, right? Some of us are, please bring your financial information. Others might say, like, we don't need you to bring any information in the first meeting. If we decide to move forward, we'll send you a list later of some additional documents that we may need. You also the what not to worry about.
Hmm.
Is there something?
That's
Is that
interesting.
is it? Well, it just was that your reference to like, and don't worry about bringing the documents. I'll ask them for you later if we decide to work together. Or were you
Yeah, I
going
never.
somewhere else with that?
Yeah, that's interesting. What could you I mean, that may have been maybe I wrote that down because I know I wrote that to you in prep for this call. I may have been thinking about like I actually used to literally say to people, relax, right? Don't worry, there's not going to be a commitment asked for at the end of this meeting. Like we're just here to have a conversation about money to see if it's a good fit. If it's not a good fit, I used to say this, if it's not a good fit, I will be if it's okay, I'll be the first to tell you. And I'll probably even have a suggestion as to where you could go. So that may be what I was referencing. And what else could you not worry about? Um, I have no
Don't worry
agenda.
about bringing. Yeah, I have no agenda. Don't worry about bringing all of your documents and information. I could even see an aspect of, I'm just trying to understand what's going on in your life today. We're not going to get into your whole financial history. I don't want to say that because maybe we will. So here's what I'm like processing in my head. I know we've had both like prospects that were tough to get in, and one I can think of in particular that basically ended up ghosting us that we never managed to work with. And what I found out afterwards, it basically came down to they had credit card problems. Like he had credit card problems that was giving them spending problems.
Mm,
They made a lot of money, but they spent a lot of money. So nominally a quote unquote a good prospect. Like they made a lot of money. They could save if only he would stop spending so much. And the meeting the meeting fell through for what I eventually sort of after the fact pieced together and inferred down to they were not ready to have that conversation as a couple.
mm,
And accepting a meeting with me as their financial planner meant they were going to have to deal with that as a couple, and they were not ready to deal with that as a couple. So
yeah,
it was easier to say no to the meeting than say yes and implicitly commit to the fact that apparently we're going to have it out about this credit card thing. And I mean the reality is like, okay, if they're going to do an ongoing financial plan, we're going to have to uncover that eventually. But like, I'm not getting into like how much did you spend on wine in the first meeting.
yeah, yeah. I think maybe that could be. I was like, man, there's no magic sentence for that one, but I think maybe that could just be, generally we find these meetings to be pretty high level, right? And
Okay.
and we're just all we really need is enough information to decide if what we do is a good fit for you. So I think the idea of like
Okay.
maybe it's don't worry by stating it the other way, which is like we find these
I
conversations
like that.
like what are we going to talk about? It's a high level discussion about what's on your mind and precipitated the meeting request.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you email this in advance, you send it as a pre-meeting
Yeah.
explanation. I mean, I guess I'm envisioning like for so many of us that use scheduling tools these days, I mean, like this could just be in your like Calendly confirmation sequence or even
Yeah.
in your confirmation email. Like, hey, here's a few notes about the meeting you confirmed. Heck,
Yeah.
put it in an or for like put it in the calendar invite that the little iCal
Yeah.
attachment they get if you're using one of those tools.
Yeah. I mean, what I literally did was this was just an email that went out about 3 days before the meeting. And again, I don't think, look, what you don't want to do is overwhelm somebody,
Right.
right? So I just think we've talked about a lot. I'm not sure I would put everything we just talked about in there, but you just
Oh,
think through
Carl, I
like
was using what you said like a checklist.
uh,
Everything you said is going in there, my friend.
shocking, that we don't, nobody does that, do they? Like
Oh, someone else out there does it that way.
the
I can't be the
17
only
point,
I
this,
can't be
the
the only
17,
one. Yeah,
yeah, the
look at how many
17
people
point
still
wealth
email you
management
about the
audit
17
still,
point
they still
checklist.
want what? No, this is only 16. So I think you just look, what would it do, what could you do in a couple of sentences to lower the temperature? Pretend like you're the human coming to the meeting for the first time.
I'll pretend.
What would be really helpful? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That's it.
I
I
like it.
think,
Like it feels very actionable. I mean, it's like I don't know who's listening to this, and when you get to your office or back from your office or out to your office, wherever you're going as you're commuting while listening to this, like who's doing this next week or tomorrow or later this afternoon?
yeah. Let me just emphasize, like this feels like a small thing, but I think what we're pointing to is the client to be and their locus of control, right? The just the ability to feel like the environment is going to be predictable
Mhm.
and they have some control, right? And if we can give people that feeling, it's the beginning
Yeah.
of everything we're trying to give them, right? Like we can help you feel a little bit more like control. And if we do that, the level to which we can do that around the edges, and there are certain things we can't do it on. So why not do it on parking, right?
Right.
Because certain things we can't, right? Like so maybe back to that sketch that the focus sketch, things that matter and things that I can control. There's so much about our work that we have no control over, and there are a few things that we have no control over that matter a lot. So we may as well put a little bit of focus, and I think what that does is just reduce. I don't think we can overestimate the level, just like my venture capitalist friend going to ski up the
Yeah.
mountain. Like he was like, my gosh, this is so helpful. 'Cause I don't have to wonder whether I need to bring the all that stuff I take other places.
Right, 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 right.
I don't think we can overestimate how valuable that is for people.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for the suggestion, Carl.
Yeah, cheers, Michael. Super fun.